thank you. I just wanted to ask Pam, in the beginning, what compelled her to work with this particular population, and also to, in her stories, help us to understand some of the myths and misconceptions that we might have about sex workers.
In the beginning, I knew nothing about sex work. Absolutely nothing. I went to seminary, and when I was ordained, which was right before I came back here, I left here to go to seminary, and I came back, and my ordination was about a week before I came back. And at my ordination, a woman stood in the top balcony of the church and sang a cappella, "I wish my eyes had not been opened. I wish that I hadn't seen, because now I'm responsible to set my sisters free." And when she chose that song, I really thought it was a wonderful song, but I thought, why did she pick that? And I think she knew more than I did. When I came back to Hawaii, of course, I was a Baptist minister and couldn't find a job. Duh. I was a woman. It was 1987. They didn't hire women. But like I said this morning, I was adventuresome. I was working out at the men's prison at Waiava in the evening and teaching the first round of HIV STD education in the public school system, which I don't know if you remember or not, but in 1987 we were doing condom demonstrations in the public schools here in Hawaii. And guess what? The world didn't end. So someone said to me, this wonderful man named Aaron Peak is passing out condoms down in Chinatown to the sex workers and the injection drug users, and he wants to go on vacation. He doesn't have anybody to take over for him. We thought about you. So I meet this guy at 12 o'clock midnight on the corner of, hotel and, I don't know, some street, Pauhani probably. Anyway, I got down there and he gave me the condoms and he took me around, and so we met some of the working girls, and I was like, they were so smart and so articulate, and I was so impressed. Now, I'm one of those people who used to drive through Chinatown at night and roll up my windows because I was like afraid, right? And here I am down there. And then the second place that he took me was, remember the old Pantheon bar? And you went through the Pantheon bar and you walked in the back, and there was this little alley, and it was a shooting gallery for everybody shooting up. And that was the second place he took me. But anyway, I realized then by asking around that there were absolutely no programs doing HIV STD education with sex workers. And so with the help of some friends, I wrote a grant that was submitted to the Department of Health that then went to the Center for Disease Control. And in 2 months, it was funded. I thought, that's what you do. You write a grant, you get money. Am I crazy or what? Anyway, that was the first and last time that ever happened. So, but when the grant came down from the CDC to the Department of Health, it was given not to the organization that helped me write the grant, but to the Waikiki Health Center. And they hired me to do the project, but in the project it was listed that I had to work in Waikiki. Well, I go out on the street in Waikiki thinking it's going to be just like Chinatown. I mean, a hoe is a hoe is a hoe, right? No, that's not right. But anyway, I thought that, and quite honestly, I believed every myth I had ever heard about sex work. I believed that the average age for a woman or man in the United States to enter sex work was 14, the whole United States. I believe that all sex workers had pimps. I believe that it was totally, absolutely, in every incidence, violence against women and our men. So I go out on the street. First of all, I have all these myths in my head. Second of all, I am the very first outreach worker. Nobody knows what an outreach worker is. What do they do? How do they do it? We didn't know. I just made it all up as I went around. And I found out that no one would talk to me. It was a year before anyone talked to me. I would go home at night and cry or in the morning, and cry because I'm like, I'm not doing my job. I haven't told anybody about HIV. I haven't, I couldn't even, people wouldn't even take condoms from me because they were afraid. Maybe I was DEA, maybe I was undercover or something. So the story I told you this morning was this first story about how it helped, how I became a part of that community. I would work on the street 5 days a week at night with the women and finally became integrated into that community. And on the weekends, I would go out and walk the street in my collar because I wanted people there to know that there was more to me, just like there's more to them. We all have our stories. We all have different roles that we play. So over the years, as I started to interact with sex workers all over the world, go to conferences in Thailand and on the mainland and to sex worker rights conferences, I was like, boy, was I wrong. I was wrong about this. And yet I'd been telling all these people this stuff and it wasn't true. And I felt so bad because it was the gospel as far as I was concerned. But it wasn't right. And then I had to go back and tell people what I had learned was more of the truth. And you know what? They didn't want to listen. Because it's much easier to listen to the horrible stories. And people love that. The gorier it is, the more violent it is, blood and guts all over the screen, fast cars, the whole 9 yards. Because people buy into the myth of either the happy hooker, it's either Pretty Woman, or real high-end escort, or you're a street worker and you've got a pimp and you get the you-know-what beat out of you every night. But there's like this whole continuum of sex work. And so those were some of the myths. And one was that community is never formed on the street. Hookers aren't friends. Well, on any given night, they're not on the street. But I can tell you now that I have known one group of sex workers for over 30 years. They did form community, and to this day, they would back each other up. Now, maybe they've had to go back and apologize for beating them up, stabbing them, whatever happened, but you know what? They're willing to do that because they have this bond. They formed this community. And part of that bond was formed by the things that the outreach workers that we did out on the street. Because we had to figure out what worked. What worked for us won't work for you. I can tell you that we had condom coloring contests. We played spin the dick games. The Easter Bunny came every year with Easter baskets. Because the one thing that we figured out was that when you're working with very young women, some children, who were involved in sex work, the one thing they've missed out on is having a childhood. And so we tried to use that to tap into it. The Easter Bunny came. Santa Claus came. We had Christmas parties, And with the Easter Bunny, everybody on the street would come up and say, I want an Easter basket. I want an Easter basket. And I'm like, are you a hoe? No. Well, then guess what? You do not get a or Easter basket or a Christmas stocking because the Girl Scouts made Christmas stockings for us. So that's the beginning.
That's fascinating. I don't know where to begin now. I would like for you, though, to give us a little bit more detail then of some of those connection stories, the individual ones, what you had to listen for, or your, if you will, ministry of presence.
I think one thing about harm reduction, and we didn't call it harm reduction then, is that you walk with the people. So I walked with women. The women I walked with walked down Kalakaua and Kuhio, and sometimes the back streets to Satala. I mean, you know, who knows. But I walked with women, and you had to listen to them and listen to what they needed. And one of the ways that we addressed that was putting out the first newspaper in Hawaii for sex workers. And the first one we put out, well, first of all, it was called On the Track, because the track is where they worked. And the women would say, what is this? And why do I need this? And I said, you know, like doctors have the AMA, you know, so you got the newspaper, you got On the Track. And in it would be the domestic violence wheel, would be, we're giving free mammograms on this day. One year, Mother's Day, everyone got a 5-minute free call to any woman in their life that they considered someone who had been motherly to them. For some of them, it was a foster parent. For some, it was a caregiver in a mental facility. Very few of them was their mothers. And so programs need to be developed to address the underlying causes of when kids run away and what they seek. They seek someone to care about them and to love them. And trust me, there's always going to be somebody out there to do that, whether they have an ulterior motive or not, and most of the time they do. So we told jokes. I would tell them, okay, this is what the legislature's proposing for you. What would you like for me to tell them? And they would tell me. And I would go to the committee meeting and I would say, the sex workers in Waikiki said to tell you this. Fuck off. Or whatever it was they said. But I would say exactly what they told me. Exactly. So, you know, it was about listening. And that's what you're about. If you're into harm reduction, is listening and helping people make good decisions. For instance, if I see her out on the street, and every time I see her, she's got a black eye, I know she lives in a weekly, I know that she has no money, she has no transportation, and she gets beat up all the time. And I'm going to say, you know what? Tell me something about her. And her reply is, well, she has a car. She has her own apartment. Maybe there's a different way to do this. You know, she hasn't had any black eye or anything in a long time. Maybe, you know, have you ever thought about dancing? You know? Or in the newspaper, there was our article one time, it's never too young to start thinking about retirement. Did you know that you can get your GED at Kaimuki High School and you can still work? There are possibilities. One woman I remember walking down the street said to me, so Pam, if you were going to quit working, what would be the best advice that you could give a girl who was going to quit working? Well, this was probably in the early 90s. And I said, you need to stack your money and buy a computer. Okay, she did. And she bought a Computer for Dummies book, and she taught herself how to use it. And as I live and breathe, the woman is the business manager for the largest private Christian school in Las Vegas today. Because someone told her to buy a computer. You know, so were you out there saving souls on the street? No, I was out there walking with women and listening to their needs and helping them to access those things. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Oh, yes, and then some. And could we have a round of applause for Pam? That was really quite extraordinary.